Hey, future CPAs, so glad you're here. If you're tackling RFBT, you know corporate governance is, well, a beast. That's why today we're doing a high-yield power session, one that's actually designed to stick in your brain for the long haul. We're zeroing in on the board of directors and corporate officers. You know, the stuff you absolutely, positively have to nail for the LECPA. Ready? Let's get into it.
Okay, first up, let's get our brains warmed up with a classic LECPA-style question. When you picture a huge corporation, who's calling the shots? Is it the famous CEO on the news? Or maybe the thousands of shareholders who technically own the place? The answer? Well, it's not as obvious as you might think, and it really gets to the core of how a corporation is built.
And the correct answer? The one you need to burn into your memory is the board of directors. This all comes from something called the doctrine of centralized management. Fancy term, but it just means the board is the supreme authority. The best way to think about it, they are the brain of the corporation. They don't handle every little email, but they make all the big decisions. Every strategy, every major purchase, every bit of property. It's all under their control.
So it's simple. If you want to understand how a corporation really works, you have to start at the top, inside its command center, the board. So let's break down who gets a seat at the table, how long they can stay, and who is definitely not invited to the party.
Okay, pay attention, because this slide is a classic exam trap. In a regular stock corporation, we call them directors. Their term is for 1 year, period, and they have to own at least one share of stock. But in a non-stock corporation, like a charity or a foundation, they're called trustees. Their term can be longer, up to 3 years, and they just have to be a member. That 1 year versus up to 3 year difference, that is prime LSCPM material, so lock it in.
Think of this as a pure memory hack for some easy points on the exam. The law is super clear about who can't be a director. Basically, if you've been convicted of a serious crime or caught doing some shady business stuff within the last 5 years, you're out. This is perfect for a multiple choice question, so just memorize this list. It's that simple.
Okay, so if the board is the brain, who's actually running around doing the work every day? That's where the corporate officers come in. You can think of them as the hands and voice of the corporation. The board comes up with the vision, and these are the people who make it happen.
At the top of the officer list is the president. Their main gig is running the meetings. But here is the absolute must-know, highlight this in your notes detail. The president must be a director. That is non-negotiable. And they can't wear too many hats either. The law says, nope, you cannot be the president and the corporate secretary or the treasurer at the same time.
Next up, we have the treasurer, the guardian of the company's cash. Now, the key qualification here is not about being a director. They don't have to be one. What's crucial is that they must be a resident of the Philippines. And that just makes sense, right? You want the person in charge of the money to be within the country's reach for accountability. Don't forget that residency rule.
And then there's the corporate secretary, the official keeper of the records. Now lean in close for this one because this is a classic trick question. The secretary has a double requirement. They must be both a citizen and a resident of the Philippines. Remember, the treasurer just needs to be a resident. The secretary needs both. Getting that little distinction right is what separates a good score from a great one.
All right, time for a little scenario. Imagine a director suddenly quits, just a few months into their term. Now there's an empty chair in the boardroom. Who gets to fill it? Do the other directors just pick a friend? Or do the shareholders have to vote? This is a real-world problem with some very specific rules.
So the answer depends entirely on one thing: quorum. That's just the minimum number of directors you need to have a valid meeting. If the directors who are left still make up a quorum, they can just vote and pick a new person. Easy. But if so many directors leave that there's no quorum, then the power goes back to the stockholders. They have to call a whole special meeting to elect someone new. And here's the special case you got to know for the exam: the emergency board. If there's no quorum and the company is about to face serious damage, the law lets the remaining directors appoint officers to temporarily fill the seats and take emergency action.
Now, here's a key idea. Not all corporations are treated the same. The law puts a much bigger magnifying glass on companies that have a huge impact on you and me, the public. We're talking about banks, companies on the stock exchange, that kind of thing. So let's look at how their rules are a little different. This table breaks it down pretty clearly. We're talking about the big players here, companies you can buy stock in, or big ones with at least 50 million pesos in assets and 200 or more shareholders, plus pretty much any financial institution you can think of. The main takeaway is simple. These companies handle the public's money and trust, so the law says you guys need extra safeguards. And the #1 biggest safeguard is this:
20%. For any of those special public interest corporations, at least 20% of their board has to be made up of independent directors. So what's an independent director? It's basically an outsider, someone with no major business or family connections to the company. They're there to give an unbiased opinion, to prevent everyone from just agreeing with the boss and to look out for the little guy.
And just so you know, this isn't some random guideline. Here's the proof. This is literally from the law book, the Revised Corporation Code. It says right there in black and white that these corporations shall have independent directors constituting at least 20% of such board. Seeing the actual legal text like this really helps it stick in your head for the exam.
On top of the independent directors, these special corporations also have to hire another mandatory officer, a compliance officer. This isn't an optional role. This person's entire job is to be the rule keeper, to make sure the company is playing by all the laws and regulations. Think of them as another layer of protection, another set of eyes, making sure everything is above board.
So, being a director sounds pretty powerful, and it is. But with great power comes, you guessed it, great responsibility. And in the corporate world, that means very serious legal duties and some pretty terrifying personal risks. Let's dig into what a director promises to do and what happens if they mess up. Okay, here's another awesome study hack for you. To remember the main duties of a director, just remember 3 letters, DLO. It's a super simple way to remember the 3 pillars of what's called their fiduciary duty, which is just a fancy way of saying their duty to always act in the company's best interest. DLO is your key to acing any question on this.
Let's break it down real quick. D is for diligence. It means you have to pay attention and do your homework like any reasonable person would. L is for loyalty. The company comes first, not your own wallet or your friend's business deal. And O is for obedience. You have to follow the law and the company's own rule book. See? D-L-O. Simple.
So what happens if they break those DLO duties? This is where it gets serious. Look at that phrase in the law, liable jointly and severally. That's legal speak for something called solidarity liability. And what it means is this. If the board messes up and causes, say, 10 million pesos in damages, the person who lost money can sue just one director for the full 10 million. That's a huge personal risk designed to keep directors acting right. And here it is again, right from the source. This is Section 30 of the Code, and it lays out that massive risk in no uncertain terms. Directors who are grossly negligent or act in bad faith are personally on the hook. It's a reminder that a seat on the board isn't just a title, it's a massive responsibility with real-world financial consequences.
Phew. Okay, we have covered a lot. So let's wrap it all up and consolidate everything into one final, super powerful review slide. This is your cheat sheet. Seriously, you might want to get your phone out and screenshot this one.
All right, let's do a lightning round to lock this in. Board of Directors, the brain, 1-year term. Trustees, up to 3 years. President, must be a director, can't be secretary or treasurer. Treasurer, must be a resident. Secretary, must be a citizen and a resident. Public Interest Corps, they need a compliance officer and 20% independent directors. Emergency Board, formed from officers when there's no quorum and big trouble's coming. A director's duty, easy, DLO. And their liability, it's jointly and severally. You got this.
But at the end of the day, these aren't just rules to memorize for a test. This is the operating system for corporate decision-making. So the next time you read about a company having a huge success or a spectacular failure, think about this stuff. How did those duties of diligence, loyalty, and obedience, and that very real fear of personal liability influence the choices that were made? When you can answer that, you're not just studying for an exam, you're starting to think like a real pro. Good luck with the review, and I'll catch you on the next one.